Using sustainability claims is good for your profit, it is good for your environment, and also it is good for your investors. Definitely keep communicating, it is important. There is ways in which you can communicate properly.
Hi out there, my name is Claudia Klingelhöfer. I'm a journalist and marketing and comms person. Since quite a while I'm focusing on sports and outdoor business. And of course, as the planetary crisis gets more and more evident, sustainability is also an important topic. Together with you, I want to explore sustainable challenges. And this time we dive deeper into green claims. Shall I say it or shall I leave it? For this, I have a decent expert with me, Diana Born. Welcome.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Diana, please tell us, how did it come that you studied marine organisms and then you came all the way to sustainability?
Yeah, so I'm a biotechnologist by training and studied marine organisms in my PhD. After that, I went into marine conservation and monitored coral reefs. And over the past 4 years, I then focused on consulting corporates regarding sustainability strategy and communication with a specific focus on climate and circular business models.
Yeah, great. And in this episode, you will learn how you can communicate in a decent and sound and appropriate way about sustainability topics, why it is more important than ever to talk about sustainability, and why it's important to radically change marketing and comms about sustainability. Diana, the title of the episode is Green Claims. Shall I say it or shall I leave it? And to be honest, a few years ago there were lots of green claims, but nowadays things get more complicated. For instance, in 2022, the Dutch Consumer and Market Authority revealed that Decathlon was communicating with eco-design claims, sustainability filters and an environmental labeling system that didn't indicate the evaluation criteria and the sustainability benefits. Decathlon agreed to stop using and adjusting claims, and they paid 400,000 euros to sustainable causes. And at ISPO 2024, suddenly there popped up the expression of greenwashing. So I wonder if it makes sense to communicate about sustainability in a marketing way or just leave it all to the sustainability reports.
That is a really good and fair question. So what we have seen in the last years, and now going maybe a little bit further back even than the Decathlon case, is that there has really been a lot of green claims out there, and often without any data validation in the background. So there was just a claim about this is more sustainable, this is climate neutral, but very little evidence behind. So what we see now is that step by step, the legal practice is picking up on that, and there is more and more court decisions that there has to be more transparency what is actually behind this claim. And why did that happen, that there was so little evidence behind or that these claims existed? I think one reason is clearly it is very hard to get environmental data, of course, so it is then very hard to communicate about something that you cannot measure so well. The other problem is, of course, also that maybe marketing and communication people are not as well informed as maybe the people who do the sourcing or the people who develop the product, who have more information about certain properties and have maybe dug more into environmental properties of certain materials that they use. Or the sustainability department might have that information for you, but maybe you did not consult them so well, and until recently you would get through. You could communicate, but only recently legal practices pick up on that. And now, of course, marketing communication people are in some ways insecure about what can I say and what not, and slowly start to build more capacities on sustainability topics and how to communicate.
But once again, why is greenwashing not an option?
Yeah, I would say there's 3 reasons. First of all, using sustainability claims is good for your profit, it is good for your environment, and also it is good for your investors. So let's start maybe with the profit. There are two interesting studies from McKinsey, one in the US, that showed that products using sustainability claims actually had 18% more sales growth than expected. And the other study is recently from Germany. And here they really tested the willingness to pay of consumers for products with sustainability claims. And they found that 14 out of these 15 claims really, consumers were willing to pay for these products, and they had a positive effect on the consumer decision. So definitely keep communicating, it is important for your revenues. And the second point, consumers, of course, have an impact on that planet. And if I choose to buy a jacket with a lower footprint, then of course we all benefit on the climate benefits. And this is because we do have a planetary crisis. I guess I don't have to mention that climate is changing rapidly and so on. So any positive benefit we can achieve through consumer decisions are positive benefits for this planet. And the third point is investors start to get very curious about the sustainability management of corporates. And now even the EU has put into place, for example, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive and the EU Taxonomy, which are specifically for the financial sector, so that they can make profound decisions into which corporate to invest. So for this, you will also hopefully get investments and can invest into future products.
Okay, but what I don't get here at that point is, why is it so important to kind of involve the consumer here? So what has the consumer to do with the EU net zero target?
That is a really good question. So let's maybe start with why still continue communicating. So please keep communicating and don't stop, because there is ways in which you can communicate properly. And it is important for your consumers because we all have an impact, of course, on the planet, also by the consumer decisions we make. So one example, if we take an outdoor jacket, a waterproof raincoat that, for example, costs 70 kilograms of CO2 equivalent emissions throughout its entire life cycle. And in the EU, maybe within 10 years, 100 million people have to buy one raincoat. Then this would cause 7 million tons of carbon equivalent emissions. And this is, of course, a huge number. Now let's consider the jacket cannot be repaired well and you have to replace it after 5 years. So within these 10 years, you have to do this purchase twice. Then we will have 14 million of CO2 emissions. And if you now consider that, for example, a company can offer a production process in which you only cause half of these CO2 emissions, then suddenly you can reduce this footprint by millions. So this really has an impact. And this is also what the EU has picked up and has now come up with regulations to basically better inform consumers. So they ask from corporates to not confuse and have prepared, for example, this Empowering Consumers Directive, which is about, basically not having misleading claims and not being vague. And this is already in force or entered into force recently. So it has to be applied by September 2026. And this is only one measure. Of course, the EU wants to become net zero or has net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. And for that, of course, the consumer perspective is one. We all have to take measures, all sectors. There are strategies for transport and energy sector, food, but also companies have to take actions, for example, through the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive. And yeah, one measure is also how to inform consumers properly so they can also have a positive impact.
Oh, wow, that's quite a lot. And as I can see, you're a scientist and there come numbers and numbers and numbers and equivalents and stuff like that. But I wonder, it must be really complicated to get a intersection between the scientific system and the legal system. Isn't that really complicated, that those different systems understand each other?
Yeah, that is definitely a gap that I would say needs to be closed, because what the EU, of course, realized, they want to achieve a net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. This is due to them signing the Paris Agreement, that they want to help globally to stay well below 2 degrees global warming. And why 2 degrees? This is really based on science. So scientists over many years internationally found out what effects it does have on human life on this planet, and it will be best for us today and in future that we keep below this level. So, and these scientists that also inform, for example, the governments that have signed the Paris Agreement, they, for example, also define already certain claims. For example, the claim climate neutral. And that is out there for many years. But when you look into the advertisement that we see on products, also today, I still passed by in the train station and saw somewhere advertisement with climate neutral. It is still out there, but it is, not valid. Climate neutral contains much more than just offsetting. It is really having net zero emissions, maximum balancing the unavoidable emissions with appropriate removals, making sure that no further biogeochemical Earth systems are influenced and surface reflectivity is not influenced. No product, no company, let's say nearly no, can basically achieve this. So you find this information, it is out there, you can get informed. And what I now see, to close the circle, is really that slowly the legal side is understanding science better, and especially the EU now wants to close that gap. And for that, they also prepared even another directive that is not yet in force. It is the Green Claims Directive that will further specify under which circumstances certain environmental claims, for example, can be used.
Oh, wow, yeah, I see there's a lot of movement going on. And what I wonder, if we have the background now, what does it mean to have a sound, appropriate communication in terms of sustainability? I mean, it's a huge question, but can you give a few rules of thumb?
Yeah, so I would say it is always important to start with the science base, have the data ready. And I already mentioned there's a difference between company level and product level. And on company level, you would really start with a so-called double materiality analysis. So find out which impacts do you have on sustainability aspects, for example, carbon emissions you cause, but also which impacts do sustainability issues have on you as a company. Do you maybe have a production site in an area in the world that might soon be flooded because of the rising water levels and so on? So these would, of course, impact you, but you should also describe, for example, opportunities that come along from sustainable business models. So this is the company side, but let's maybe today focus on products, which might be much more tangible for the moment. Here you would, for example, start with what matters. You only find out if you, for example, have a full life cycle assessment. So really from the extraction of your basic resources that you need for your product up until the very end of life, until it is disposed and finally burned or recycled or ends up wherever. And this is great data, not only knowing the carbon footprint, but of course there's many more factors like, for example, ecotoxicity, water usage, land use, and so on, that also of course play a role and have an effect on our planet. So this is what you should start with. And to make it short, for areas, so first, what matters, material topics. The second one is be complete. So really talk about the entire life cycle. Don't do cherry picking, just talk about this one little process that you've optimized. And the third step is then also be precise. Say exactly what you do, how you do it, work with numbers. And the last point is get verified, get your claims also verified. And this usually you do through external and independent verification bodies.
Okay, so we have 4 points. I want you to talk us through those. So what means material communication?
Yeah, so since I already explained a little bit, use, for example, life cycle assessments and carbon footprints, let's maybe start with an example, an imagined example. I once prepared a carbon footprint for a magnet. And magnets, for example, in a plastic casing can be used, for example, for bicycle helmets as a buckle. And the largest footprint component, carbon footprint component for this buckle is coming from the magnet, not the plastic component. So ideally you talk about what you do about the magnet. Do you use recycled magnetic material, for example? So as one part here, a positive example from the industry would be, for example, RAB. They now started to publish the so-called material facts. So they make very transparent what exactly in their products is the amount of recycled material for like which exact component and which components are fluorocarbon free or for which do they still use it. And by that they start to build up on transparency basically. So the consumers make informed decisions if they want.
Yeah, these are great examples. Can you give such evident example also for completeness?
Yes. So for completeness, maybe briefly picking up on the magnet example again. So let's say it is still very hard, for example, to use recycled magnetic material, but you can use recycled plastic for the plastic coverage of that magnet. So you want to talk about that. Fine, you can talk about it, but please be aware that if you say, okay, we save 30% of carbon emissions now by using this plastic, if you only mean this plastic component, would be not ideal. You should ideally say how many carbon emission savings you have for the entire product. And then maybe this is only, let's say, 5%. So, and then you have to decide, is it still worth communicating that you save 5%? Yeah.
And what is actually meant by a precise communication? I mean, do you put like chemical formulas on a hang tag then?
It's a very good question. Precise is first of all about targeting the consumer groups appropriately with appropriate language so that they can understand it. So on the one hand, don't overwhelm them with just technical terms, but always make sure that you explain it and put it into a context that you in general can understand. For example, if you use polyester, and it is now this tech membrane, in whichever way it is called, it makes sense also to at some point say, this is a synthetic fiber, it's polyester. Polyester, many people now understand. And then you can also still name, of course, the tech fibers you have used. And here, maybe an interesting example, let's talk about polyester and recycling from PET bottles. That is also adding maybe one component also to complete. Always talk about the complete footprint and also talk about if you change something, maybe you have now negative side effects somewhere else, maybe even outside of your product scope. It would be important to consider this. And PET is a great example for that. So what you see also, for example, in outdoor raincoats is that some of them use recycled PET or use for their polyester recycled materials, and that often comes from PET bottles. So recycled in principle, everybody thinks, of course, that's great. There can be problems if you take out the PET from a closed PET bottle cycle, because now you maybe manage to reduce your footprint because you don't need to basically use virgin fossil-based material. But now the industry that actually kept the PET bottles in cycle, they have to now extract the new fossil virgin material. So this competition is of course an issue that you have to bear in mind. So be transparent about where your recycled material comes from. And then you might also have a problem at the end of life, because PET can stay in a cycle as a bottle for a long time, whereas for textile recycling as polyester, at the end of life of that jacket, the recycling does not work so well. So not many of the textiles end up again in a new raincoat. And this has to be clarified as well. So please be precise about saying where does the recycled material come from and what happens with it at the end of life. Puma is a good example regarding communication. They make clear for their soccer jerseys that they use textile to textile recycling. They also clearly say we use 75% that come from textiles and still 25% come from PET bottles.
Okay, to wrap it up, we have 4 factors. So it's the materiality of communication, it's the completeness of communication. You have to be precise and you have to verify. And when it comes to verification, we have to, according to the EU Commission, more than 230 sustainability labels out there. So it's kind of a jungle of labels.
Yeah. So that is true. And what we see in the sport and outdoor industry, there is a lot of labels in use. And what also the study from the European Commission showed is one problem. The consumers cannot distinguish which labels are self-declaration and which ones are actually prepared by externally verified and transparent processes. So this is why now with the new regulations coming, the EU says there should be only verified labels, so externally and independently verified labels. What we see in the outdoor industry is that there is also several self-declarations, for example, Saleva Committed for Saleva and Baude Green Shape for Baude. And these in the future will also need to be verified externally. And so one positive example for an external verification that already happens now is Picture Organic Clothing. They get the external verification from Clear Fashion. So when you go in their e-commerce, you want to buy a jacket, for every product you will find the rating for that specific product by Clear Fashion, and this you will find a summary score. It is demonstrated in easy language. It explains why recycling is important, what further impacts still persist, and so on. But it also gives you all the detailed ratings, for example, for climate change, for health, for animal, and so on and so on. So it is, a really good example. Maybe I also want to add, of course, there are several self-declarations, but for example, the Baude Green Shape label is also a very interesting one, even though it is now a Baude-specific one. I would say it already fulfills so many criteria. They have properly thought it through. You can look up the criteria. It's 14 pages of Excel where they really explain, okay, the production sites have to be certified in a certain way. If you use material X, it has to be certified in a certain way, and so on. So it is transparent and would have great potential to become an ambitious, externally verified standard in the future for these certification systems that have to be set up.
Oh, that's great. And I think there are valuable examples out there. If we want to step one level above, we want to look at the companies, or do you know examples about brands or even in a wider context, like organizations that communicate in a sound way?
Yeah, I would like to mention 2 really exciting examples. The first is a commitment by a group of outdoor retailers, the so-called Outdoor Retailer Climate Commitment. And what I find very interesting here is that actually competitors have come together to work together and make transparent their climate action, their footprint, their data collection, what measures they take, and also what their goals are and what the basically science base is behind. And they put that into one document so you can really next to each other see, okay, so Bergfreunde has this footprint, but Jonderland has this footprint in scope 1, 2, 3. That is very transparent. At the same time, of course, they use this symbiosis because many of them have even the same suppliers. And to really collect all this data, I already mentioned, this is one of the big challenges to get down and get all this environmental data. They basically work together with the European Outdoor Group to collect all that data from their suppliers in a standardized way, which also reduces the effort for the suppliers. They only have to submit it once in one format through the EOG platform. And by that, together, they create this transparency. So 2 important learnings. Transparency is key really for the claims, and the second learning is really collaboration is also needed to be able to create that transparency. And I also mentioned a second example, and here I would like to mention Vaude, because maybe first starting with the EU, again, we want to achieve net zero by 2050. That requires reducing massively greenhouse gas emissions. It also mentions we have to decouple our economic activities from using fresh resources all the time. So decouple our resource use from economic activity. And what they have achieved and published it a few months ago, very proudly, was that they managed to reduce their carbon footprint from a 2019 base year, also very important for communication, already by 30% across their entire value chain. And in the same time frame, they have also managed to increase their revenue by 32%. So this is a great example that really this is possible. You can increase your revenue while decreasing your, in this case, carbon footprint, which is an evidence for this decoupling is possible, and economic growth does not need to have always more resource use. So yeah, with these, I would like to end.
Yeah, great. But to be honest, I mean, this sounds pretty compelling, intriguing, and there are some trailblazers out there. But if I go a step back and I'm in a company, I'm in a marketing department working there on campaigns, I talk to the product team and then I align with them. I maybe have to challenge my campaign with the C-level and then I have to just publish it. But if I listen to you, I have to align with the legal department. I have to align with the sustainability team and the product team and maybe even the business development, I don't know. So I wonder what new processes have to be established then.
Yeah, so definitely the way marketing and communication work has to change in some way. There definitely needs also to be a mind shift. This time you need to get all these verifications or first validations is of course needed and has to be planned into marketing roadmaps as well. At the same time, internal processes have to be set up to involve the sustainability department, for example, to get certain claims checked, either by them or by the legal department, or you get an external partner or tool that does it for you. I would also say there is need for people in marketing and communication to build up a little bit more capacity, because it is a complex topic. And as we already talked about, like PET and polyester, really the devil is in the details. You have to understand a little bit, not all technical details, but understand a little bit about what do you have to consider, what is a full life cycle of your product and so on. So this also has to be developed. So marketing might become a little bit slower, but hopefully higher in quality, so consumer decisions in the end get better and we have the positive effects.
So you mentioned already that you could use tools. So are there tools you can recommend that would use the sustainability team and also the marketing team?
Yeah, so on company level, many of you already know science-based targets that are for climate. I would now also highly recommend to start looking at science-based targets for nature, especially the sport and outdoor industry is usually quite a pioneer in using new tools. And this is definitely starting to become relevant, and here you can still do a lot of pioneering work. Regarding marketing communication departments, I would say InfoLink from House of Change, it's a startup from Germany, is quite a good recommendation because they really give you an easy tool, a platform to, first of all, validate your claims, and second of all, provide the compliant information in an easy way to the consumers through a QR code. And maybe to be also complete, Circularity ID from Circular Fashion, I can highly recommend. They also provide a QR code that you can put into your products. And this QR code even contains information to make resale, recycling and further components of the reverse supply chain easier, so that hopefully your, especially clothing, does get recycled in the end and stays in the cycle.
Okay, thanks a lot. So now we're in a short recommendation section when coming to the end. So some short questions with some short answers, please. Whom should I follow when it comes to communication and the intersection of sustainability?
So I would start maybe with some scientific sites, because I know in our busy operative life and also work and business life, we may quickly forget why we use green claims. So I recommend to follow Johan Rockström from the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, who puts very nicely into context what are planetary boundaries and what are tipping points and why we need to understand about these things. The second one is the Stockholm Resilience Center. They basically prepared the planetary boundary concept, and yeah, this is definitely why we need green claims. We want to stay in a safe operating space here. Regarding, for example, circularity, I can highly recommend the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, because they have really inspiring examples for products, but also business models that even partially come from the sport and outdoor industry, but also might help you to maybe think about new business models and concepts for your products. And regarding people, maybe also in the German-speaking market, there I would definitely recommend following Anja Schröder on LinkedIn. She usually shows really absurd greenwashing examples from every industry. And also follow Flip, or visit the website it's called Let's Flip. And they also do greenwashing analyses of brands and also show particularly verified brands in their marketplace. There's also a lot of sport brands in there.
And of course on LinkedIn I can follow Diana Born.
Of course.
Well, Diana, what do you think is the greatest challenge out there when it comes to the comms department and the sustainability team?
I would say really to set up new processes, to remember to talk with the sustainability department before you publish a new campaign. I have been in absurd situations in my consulting life that I knew the marketing manager wanted to publish a sustainability campaign, but it had never ever talked with a sustainability manager about it. So I arranged a meeting so that they can talk. That was definitely the greatest example that really we need these processes to verify, at least internally, and soon also to verify externally, and basically shift how marketing processes work a little bit.
Okay, so in 5 years, sustainability managers and comms people go to lunch together, I guess.
I hope so. And of course, I also would like to see that the marketing communication departments have, of course, more data available so that they can actually, and have of course gotten a little bit better understanding so that they actually can come up with innovative claims and innovative stories that really reach to the consumers, because really we need this innovation in that field.
Oh wow, I mean, you've put a lot of knowledge into the last few minutes, so what would be your greatest takeaways?
I would say start with the science, so use science-based methods. This is really always the starting point. Then keep validating your claims that you have come up with. And finally, please keep communicating.
Diana, thanks a lot for all the valuable information. In case you've liked this, visit ispo.com and make sure you visit the links we put in the info box.